One dead, another with life-threatening injuries in a house explosion in Birmingham. A man was rescued from the rubble last night, but a woman's body was found by fire crews inside.
The explosion, I've never heard anything so loud in all my life, and I thought, that's not a firework or a car explosion. I thought that's something quite horrific.
Also this lunchtime, nearly £2 per litre. Why are prices at the pump still going up when wholesale prices are going down? Strike UK. This time it's barristers on the picket line walking out over pay. And the back-to-back British tennis stars on centre court as Wimbledon returns in full.
This is the ITV Lunchtime News with Nina Hussain.
Good afternoon. The fire service in Birmingham has confirmed a woman died in a gas explosion in a house in the city. The emergency services were called to the blast last night. A man who was pulled from the rubble is in hospital with life-threatening injuries. The explosion destroyed one house and damaged several others. 4 men were treated at the scene for minor injuries. Callum Watkinson has our report.
The woman whose body was found in the remains of this mid-terraced house has not been named publicly yet. And a man who was pulled out alive by neighbours is on a trauma ward in hospital with life-threatening injuries. The blast could be heard for several miles. People ran from their homes to the scene. The flames may be out this morning, but a sense of shock here remains.
My whole vision pretty much went white. All you could hear was the boom, obviously. Parts of the building flew about 20 foot in the air and 40 foot outwards.
Today I was still in the shock because it was the worst incident in my life, and thanks to God, my family all safe and okay.
Other bystanders climbed over burning debris, risking their lives to save the life of the man inside. Their actions later earned them the praise of the professionals.
Heroic. So when fire crews turned up, police and members of the public had already started to mount a rescue of that individual. And obviously when our crews turned up, we took over from that. You'd see on media and videos and photos the devastation that's been caused by this, which involves one property completely destroyed and a further 3 properties that are substantially damaged.
21 people had to spend the night with relatives or in hotels, and 4 other men were treated for minor injuries. Fire crews and gas safety specialists are now working together to investigate the cause of the blast. Callum Watkinson, ITV News.
We can go live now to our Midlands reporter Ellie Pitt, who is at the scene. What is the latest?
Well, Nina, the fire service have brought us just down from the cordon in the last few moments and are providing an update just near to me, 2 reporters as we speak. It's into their investigation, which has obviously been going on overnight and well into this morning, because it's still not clear exactly what was the cause of the explosion, though Cadent, the gas emergency service for the West Midlands, has been here. They've had teams here overnight into the morning. I was here last night and have been here today as well, and I've been speaking to nearby neighbours who've just been speaking of their shock and disbelief about what's happened. They've told me that it was a noise so loud, the loudest they've ever heard in their lives, and so loud that they actually thought whatever had caused it was coming from within their own homes as well. Everyone, of course, has been saddened too to learn of the death of the woman in this house too. What's also coming out though is this incredible sense of the strength of the community here in King's Standing and the bravery of neighbours here too. Between 10 and 12 men, I understand, rushed into the house as it was on fire to try and save those inside and carried out the man who's critically ill in hospital. 21 people from nearby streets had to stay elsewhere last night with friends, relatives and in hotels, and I've been told that they may not be allowed back here tonight either as the work of the emergency services continues.
Ellie Pitt, some incredible bravery there. Thank you very much. Thank you. To the war in Ukraine, and Volodymyr Zelensky has urged Western leaders at the G7 summit in Germany to make a big push to end the war with Russia before the winter sets in. The Ukrainian president addressed world leaders who are gathered in the German Alps. Our political correspondent Romilly Weeks is also there. Is there a collective will to try to end this war by that deadline then?
Well, Nina, the G7 leaders here in Germany are certainly presenting an absolutely united front on this. And although it's not just in their gift, and Russia certainly is showing no desire to stop its relentless aggression against Ukraine, even shelling Kiev on the first day of this summit. But after a session on Ukraine here, which President Vladimir Zelensky joined via video link, the G7 leaders issued a pretty definitive statement on Ukraine, saying they will support it for as long as it takes. And that is important because there had been signs that some countries here were suffering from war fatigue, and the finger was being pointed at France, that it was difficult for them to continue supporting a protracted war when times are difficult economically back home. Boris Johnson certainly has been trying to rally his fellow leaders to support this big push of military support for Ukraine to get President Zelensky into a position of strength in any future negotiations. And he certainly appears buoyed by the meetings that he's had with fellow leaders, saying that there are no cracks in the support.
The logic of the position is still so clear. There is no deal that the President Zelensky can really do. So in those circumstances, the G7 supporters of Ukraine around the world have to continue to help the Ukrainians to rebuild their economy, to get their grain out, to export their grain. And of course, we have to help them to protect themselves.
He's there talking about that, but he's also dealing with pressing problems at home.
Yes, he is, although that's not how he wants to portray it. He was asked about plotters back home, and he said that issue was settled a few weeks ago. Of course, it wasn't. 40% of his MPs voted against him a few weeks ago, and he'll be nervously waiting to see whether other members of his cabinet follow Oliver Dowden and resign. And of course, meanwhile, there are elections to the 1922 Committee of Backbench MPs, which could change the timing of any future confidence vote. This issue is by no means settled.
Romilly Weeks, thank you. The RAC has accused fuel retailers of continuing to put up prices at the pump despite the cost of wholesale petrol going down. The data firm Experian said prices hit a record high this weekend. The average price of petrol is nearly £1.92 a litre, while the average price of diesel reached almost £2. Simon Williams from the RAC joins me now. Thanks for talking to me this lunchtime. Just fill us in there. What is exactly happening to wholesale prices?
Hi, Nina. The price of wholesale petrol has been coming down for a while. And last week it came down again. And really, retailers should be reflecting that at the pumps. We often talk in fuel terms about the rocket and a feather. Prices go up like a rocket in a rising market and fall like a feather in a falling one. Obviously, prices have just gone into reverse in the last week or two, and retailers really should be passing that on in the same way they do on a daily basis when prices go up. But of course,
why aren't
they don't.
Simon?
That's a good question. I think the longer they can hold off, the more money they will make. But this is a strange time to be doing it because the Competition and Markets Authority is looking into retailer behaviour at the moment. In the days after the Chancellor cut the fuel duty rate, the RAC monitors retailer margin, and there appeared to be 2 pence a litre extra margin in the 30 days after compared to the 30 days before.
This is
really,
a problem right now for motorists, though, isn't it? So while the authority is looking into what's happening with prices at the pump, can anything be done right now to try and speed that investigation up, I guess, is the question.
We need retailers to be being fair with drivers. They are their customers after all, and they need to treat them fairly. But also, I think we've reached the stage, because wholesale prices did go up so high, that the government needs to take further action. The 5p a litre duty cut has long since been swallowed up. So we need more action, either a further fuel duty cut or taking some percent off the VAT rate. VAT is now equates to 32 pence a litre, 53p duty, and you're looking at 85 pence a litre in tax on petrol alone.
Given the situation we are in right now, what is your advice to motorists? Should they be trying to make fewer journeys if they're not doing that already, or change the way that they drive, not put the air conditioning on, wind the windows down? What should people be doing?
People need to try and buy the cheapest fuel they possibly can, which obviously is difficult at the moment. Once they've got it in the tank, really try to make every mile count by being fuel efficient with your driving. Be easy on the accelerator, try to keep the car moving steadily within the speed limit, and you'll eke out every last mile. But we probably need something else to happen in terms of government intervention to make things better, because people need their cars. We know 8 in 10 people would struggle to get by without having access to a car, according to long-term REC research. People need their cars to go to work, to run their lives, to take children to school, to buy food. It's just this amount of money is really eating into their incomes on a monthly basis.
Simon Williams, thank you very much for your thoughts on this matter. Thank you. Criminal trials in some courts in England and Wales will be delayed or disrupted because barristers have gone on strike. They're making the case for higher pay, saying barristers are leaving their professions, making the backlog in cases which began before the pandemic even worse. Ben Chapman is at Manchester Crown Court. Ben, another day, another strike.
Yes, and many people will think of barristers as being well paid, but those who work in the criminal courts, like those behind me, and many of those who've been on picket lines up and down the country today, say that's simply not the case. Many of them rely on fees set by the government under legal aid. Now, that's what pays for representation for people who can't afford their own lawyer. And the barristers say those fees work out at less than the minimum wage quite often, because they don't take into account many hours spent preparing for cases. I've been speaking to one newly qualified barrister who says that she earns just £12,000 a year. She says she earned more as a barista in a coffee shop than she does now as a barrister in court.
So for an awful lot of Crown Court work, we get a fixed fee for the hearing. That can be £91 for an admin hearing, just over £100 for a bail application, and so on. So anything that's not a trial. That doesn't factor in travel. We don't get train fare. It doesn't factor in speaking to the defendant, and it doesn't factor in reading the papers. So this isn't just a problem for barristers. It's a problem for the people whose barristers can't afford to put in the hours to represent them properly.
And Ben, this really does impact many people.
Yes, it's causing disruption to cases here in Manchester today and in courts across England and Wales. The government says it will only make what is already a huge backlog of cases in the courts even worse, forcing victims to wait longer for justice. The Criminal Bar Association, which represents barristers, says that backlog has been caused in part because of so many barristers leaving the profession. They say 40% quit within their first year. More than 500 trials last year couldn't even start because there was a shortage of barristers. Now, the government says it has already offered a 15% rise in fees, which would add about £7,000 to a typical barrister's salary. But barristers say it's not enough, it won't kick in quickly enough, and they're planning more strikes over the next few weeks.
Ben Chapman, thank you. Still to come this lunchtime. Welcome back. Wimbledon, full crowds and British stars return to SW19. Before that, the Charity Commission says it's looking into whether it needs to carry out a review of donations received by Prince Charles's charity, the Prince of Wales Charitable Fund. The Sunday Times reported that millions of euros in cash were handed over by a former Prime Minister of Qatar to the Prince. Ian Woods is with me. Remind us of what was alleged at the weekend.
Well, we know from the Sunday Times reporting that Sheikh Hamad bin Jassim bin Jaber Al Thani, a former Prime Minister of Qatar, on 3 separate occasions handed over a total of €3 million in person, in cash, to Prince Charles. And the money was then passed on to one of his charitable organisations, which allocates grants to non-profit organisations that he has taken an interest in. Is that illegal? Well, apparently, no, it's not. Is it unusual? Well, yes, in that form and in that amount, yes, it is. So Clarence House, which disputes some of the details in the Sunday Times, which included a reference to the money being in Fortnum and Mason bags, but they have said that the donations were passed immediately to one of the Prince's charities, which carried out the appropriate governance, and have assured us that all procedures were followed correctly.
And for clarification, what's the Charities Commission's role in all of this?
Well, the Charity Commission looks into all administration of charities. So they are carrying out effectively a pre-inquiry investigation to see whether they need to get involved. They say that we're aware of these reports. We will review the information, whether there is any role for the Commission to take in this matter. But it does offer guidelines on the sort of donations that charities could accept. They ask you to look on the lookout. Is it unusual? Is it in a foreign currency? Are there any reputational risks or anything like that? Of course, it doesn't specifically ban cash donations because that would prevent us dropping coins into collecting boxes. But there are rules to be followed, and it is going to look into that. Is it simply how this benefactor operates on a regular basis, or is there something more unusual? Is it a bit grubbier that the heir to the throne is accepting large amounts of cash rather than something perhaps more appropriate, such as a bank transfer?
Ian Woods, thank you very much. Thank you. The former Prime Minister, Sir John Major, has been giving evidence to the Infected Blood inquiry, which is looking into what's been described as the biggest treatment disaster in NHS history. He described the victims, 30,000 of them, as having incredibly bad luck, saying the impact on them was a horror. They were infected with hepatitis C and HIV from contaminated blood products from America through blood transfusions in the 1970s and 80s. Almost 3,000 have already died. Rachel Younger is at the inquiry and just sent this.
Listening to every word of Sir John Major's evidence, there's been a number of those people who were infected with these blood products back in the 70s and 80s. People who've lived with either hepatitis or HIV since the 70s and 80s, who've been turned down for jobs, mortgages and health insurance over those years, and who've long argued that what happened to them had been a disaster waiting to happen, that the government should have thought far more carefully about the fact that the blood that was being given to them was blood that was being paid for, that was coming from high-risk groups, prisoners or sex workers in America, but also Asia and Africa. So there were audible gasps as Sir John Major gave his recollections of discussions within the government about how much compensation they should have been given. This is what he had to say.
There's no amount of compensation you can give that could actually compensate for what had happened to them. What had happened to them was incredibly bad luck, awful, and it was not something that anybody was unsympathetic to.
So sympathy from Sir John, yes, but what is really needed is compensation, and there is gathering momentum for an interim payment to be made before this inquiry draws to a close next year for those affected, because so many of them are growing older, they're growing sicker, and as every month passes, more are dying. They simply don't have time to wait.
Rachel Younger reporting there. The Queen has travelled to Scotland for the start of a week of royal events. The 96-year-old, who has cut back on public engagements due to mobility issues, has been in Edinburgh for the historic ceremony of the keys. She was joined by her youngest son, Prince Edward, and his wife, Sophie. The ceremony traditionally sees the monarch handed the keys of the city and welcome her to her ancient and hereditary Kingdom of Scotland. The trip was only confirmed this morning. The Queen is expected to stay at the Palace of Holyrood House, her official residence in the Scottish capital, until the 1st of July. And finally, this lunchtime, Wimbledon is back with a real treat for tennis fans. It's the first tournament with full crowds since the pandemic. And coming up on centre court, not one but two British Grand Slam winners, Emma Raducanu and Andy Murray. Chloe Keedy is there for us. Chloe, a day of celebration in between the rain that we've already seen.
Yeah, that's right. Rain stopped play less than an hour into the action this morning, but it hasn't done anything to dampen all the excitement. It is the first time Wimbledon's been back at full capacity, as you say, since 2019. And what a day to kick things off. Not only have we got the reigning champion, Novak Djokovic, who's just walked out onto centre court, but also Emma Raducanu and Andy Murray in back-to-back matches later on. Down the hill from here, people have been braving the rain showers to queue for tickets just to get into the grounds, including one man who came all the way from America and has been camped out here since Friday night to be first in the queue.
I came from the United States and I arrived here on Wednesday, and I did some sightseeing, and then I arrived in the queue on Friday at 11:30 p.m. and I've been waiting in the queue ever since and got my ticket today.
We came last year with tickets and we were saying we kind of weirdly missed the queue. It's sort of part of the experience.
It's just exciting, I think. Yeah, it's a good day out.
The rain's not going to put you off?
No, committed. I got up at 4 a.m. for this.
And Chloe, what an afternoon ahead if you've managed to get centre court tickets, as you were saying about Raducanu and Murray.
Yeah, that's right. Also worth keeping an eye on court 2, though, where the British number 1, Cameron Norrie, is currently set up against the Spaniard Pablo Andujar. But all eyes on centre court, as you say, where Emma Raducanu takes on the Belgian Alison van Uytvanck. Now, that is set to be a really tough first-round match for Raducanu, who's struggled with a string of injuries since her amazing US Open victory last year. She has been seen here in the grounds this morning, though, looking fairly relaxed. So, look, Andy Murray up later as well. It's all to play for, and thankfully that centre court has got a roof on it, so we're not completely at the mercy of the great British weather.
Chloe, thank you. Mary's here at 6:30. That's all from me. Bye-bye.
Today, in some places, it could be pouring. But don't worry, it'll only be in very isolated areas. Heinz Salad Cream sponsors ITV National Weather.
Hello, good afternoon. A wet start across western parts this morning. Heavy rain is turning showery and moving east across the country as we go through the next few hours. For the first day of Wimbledon, it's possible there could be a shower this afternoon. But for many parts of England and Wales, skies are brightening, a blustery old day, and as we go into this evening, most of the showers will tend to die away. However, waiting out in the wings, the next system, bringing a spell of rain across Northern Ireland and later on in the night, southwest Scotland, where it'll put down some heavy rain into the early hours of tomorrow morning. The rest of England and Wales having a relatively quiet night, 9 or 10 Celsius, and that breeze continuing as we go through into the early hours of tomorrow morning. A very wet day in prospect for Northern Ireland, southwest Scotland, and a warning in place from the Met Office just caters to that rain. We could see some localised flooding. Elsewhere, the south and east having the best day again. It could get to 23 Celsius in the sunshine, but western parts of the country will have a wet and windy day. Bye-bye.
Heinz Salad Cream sponsors ITV National Weather.
At Sainsbury's, there are 150 fresh products price-matched to Aldi. Like these plump hand-picked tomatoes for £1.19, sliced and seasoned. Or these £2.69 British pork medallions. Tender, spicy, ooh, so nicey. And look at this fresh, juicy honeydew melon for £1.39. Chop, chop. When it's needed more than ever, get all the quality you'd expect from Sainsbury's price-matched to Aldi. Sainsbury's.
Chromebooks are a different way to laptop, starting with the Everything button. So you can find your files, or apps, and even answers online, instantly. And Chromebooks are secure, with virus protection.